I guess we could say with this episode of the Faraway Paladin, the prologue of the story is officially concluded. And I gotta say that I've really enjoyed my journey thus far. It's a very slow burn. It's a very nice setup for things to come. And just like I said in the past when I was, doing my first impressions, when you look at this prologue, it's kind of like how when you're creating a character for, let's say, D&D or any form of game like RPG game, you have to write out your character's, description, kind of what their life is, why they're like this, etc. And when I look at just the way Will as a character is written throughout these, episodes, it very much does look like what you would do for, let's say, D&D. Like, write out your character's backstory and get into roleplay and how it can't break these certain rules or whatever for the journey can actually begin. And I love what this does, this beginning first arc, this prologue, and it makes me really love Will as a character because there's so much that can happen. His journey is just beginning, and I wonder what he's going to learn and experience as he continues down this path, because he no longer has Blood, Mary, and Gus with him. He's going to be on his own, journeying as a follower, a disciple of Graceville, and I wonder if he will succumb to temptation. There'll be probably a lot of temptation on the road, and will he be able to hold on to his light, and will he be able to hold on to his own self, or will he fall and eventually take the hand of the god of death? I'm curious about that. It's really interesting to lead to an engaging story, and I wonder where the writer, is wanting to take that. I'm super curious to, dive into the upcoming episodes. But I guess let's get into the nitty-gritty of what this episode actually does. So it's more of a farewell, so to say. It's a farewell to Blood, Mary, and Gus. Mainly Blood and Mary, because they were able to pass on. Their souls itself were able to return to the cycle of life and death again, and it's probably the best way for their conclusion. And I like the way this was settled, because I remember when I was doing your first impressions, I was talking about how Blood, Mary, and Gus might either lose their minds, and, Will would have to try to kill them, or maybe, Blood, Mary, and Gus were actually just, lying the entire time. They didn't really care about him. They were going to sacrifice him or something. There was a lot of different, theories that could, be made about the beginning situation. But I feel like this conclusion is very nice for one reason. One, Will gets to retain his memories of his new family, Blood, Mary, Gus, and he doesn't have that kind of ruin for him. He did get raised by people that loved him, but at the same time, he wasn't one that actually had to put them down either. He was able to watch them peacefully pass on, thanks to them, denying the god of death, their souls, but also being able to just resist long enough for Will to get rid of the god of death's body at that current time. So it's a great way to just kind of settle Blood and Mary and allow them to pass on without really ruining their legacy, because I feel like if they would have turned out evil or whatever, it would have not really meshed well with the vibes and themes that the first 3 to 4 episodes have been doing. So it's perfect that the way it was handled. Which, by the way, I do want to talk about how they had the option to stick around with Will and potentially stick around till he passed on to the afterlife. This is a very important scene. I feel like this is going to be easily glanced over with people watching the episode. But the reason why it's so important is because of the way Gus explains it, is that if they would have chosen to not die and they would have chosen to have a pact with Graceville, it would have been basically the exact same thing they did with the God of Death, but this time even more selfish. It's basically like, hey, we don't really want to die. It's not because, we want to save a city or whatever, but we don't want to die because we just want to see our child, grow up and eventually die. And it's just like, it would be wrong. For instance, they should be able to willingly accept their death and move on to the afterlife and not be greedy. They got to live a lot longer than they were supposed to, and they also got to be able to go back to the cycle of life and death again. So I feel like if they would have took the hand of Graceville and continued to try to stay there as long as they could with Will, it would have been a dishonor. And I do like their decision for that and how they denied it, because they realized that they would have succumbed to temptation if they would have stuck around, which that gets into Gus. I think Gus's entire character and how he manages to stick around is very interesting, because for one reason, we know he's a greedy individual. This has been established for a very long time, that he's greedy. Like, that's what it was shown, about money and everything, and knowledge and all that. He's greedy for knowledge. So when you think about just, like, what his options were and how he chose to stick as a caretaker for the next 10 years for Graceful to watch over the Sill. It makes so much sense with his character, but I feel like there's a lot of things that Gus was hiding behind the scenes that he didn't tell us, the audience, but also Will. I feel like maybe he will disappear a lot sooner than maybe 10 years. It just, he gave a rough estimate just to give Will some hope that someone that he knows in the world is still around and actually not gone. But I feel like maybe Gus might disappear in 5 years, maybe a year, who really knows? Or he doesn't really have an actual estimate, but the way he talks is that, you know, he won't be around for much longer, and that will have to be someone that figures out, you know, what to do with the Sill. And that's what Gus implied. Like, you're going to have to be the one to figure it out. How to handle the Sill and all that, it's not up to me. And so that burden, that baggage put on to Will is very important. So, basically, the in-game goal from what we're seeing from the story, at least what was presented from this episode, is that Will needs to somehow stop the Sill from opening up, or be able to kill the entity that's going to come out of the Sill. Whatever the case may be, something's got to be done with it, and that's probably going to be the end game to really show how much growth that Will has gotten over the series. If he's able to, let's say, beat that demon, it would show that he has surpassed Blood, that he was able to best something that Blood himself, even at his peak, was not able to best. Which, speaking of Blood, Mary, and Gus, I think that the names that were given to Will is very symbolic. I like the whole message of how Will's entire name, William G. Maryblood, is just such a good name because of what it really represents. It's like literally his entire origin thrown into his name, because Blood, Mary, and Gus were his parents, and having his last name be Maryblood, which represents his mother and father, and then his middle name G, which is Gus, you know, representing his grandpa, is really interesting because it shows that he's going to carry them with him for the rest of his life. Even if they go on, he will still have their names with him, always watching over him. But it's not just that. His first name, William, is also very symbolic too. And we come to find out after the credits that the reason why he was given the name William was because Blood and Mary wanted to name their child William, and it was because they wanted to call their son, you know, William, for the helmet of will. For instance, an iron will, a will that will never back down, falter, or shake, something that will never succumb to temptation. I like that. It's a really good prologue, as I've said already, and I'm very impressed. The writing is great, and I feel like many people, like I've said already in many of my other reviews, they'll quickly throw aside this series, not because it's bad, but because there's so much going on this season, and I don't fault anyone for that, but when you really just take a hard look at it, the slow burn of this series is great because of how much care and attention is being put into it. I feel like it was very fast-paced and rushing to the scene to the next scene. It wouldn't be that good. I feel like this series would kind of falter and wouldn't be as enjoyable if it didn't take itself very slow. And so, I see why some don't like it because of that, but it's the perfect series for me to really kind of dive into the world, give a lot of lore and backstory to many different things so you can understand what is going on, especially like the deities and how one of the gods, like Mary's god, actually saved her in that moment when she was about to have her soul stolen. I think that's a very powerful moment too, to show just that the god wasn't, you know, this unforgiving god. You know, it did forgive Mary right at the start, but Mary is the one that continued to punish herself from the very beginning after she accepted the hand from the god of death. So yeah, just a lot to really consider, a lot to think about, and I'm excited for the journey of what's next, because now we don't really know. Like, obviously Will can spread the name of Graceful and all that, and, you know, spread the way of the light, but I wonder what really is his journey going to be. But I guess I'll leave it at that. It's a good episode. If you have yet to watch it, go watch it. If you yet to watch the anime, go watch it. The author is an absolute amazing and wholesome person, as I made a video yesterday about, and I think that anyone should really just give this a chance, a shot to watch, because it's worth that indeed, especially just for how wholesome the author is. But I love you guys. Be safe. If you enjoy my content, you know, please subscribe. If you like this video and I give you any form of entertainment, you know, leave a like. It helps me out a lot. But with that, be safe, stay healthy. Chibi out.